Greetings and welcome back to Beyond Hypnosis. I'm so glad you joined me today. I just had an insight that I wanted to really speak to the concept of humility and what it is. Oftentimes in the modern world, we don't realize that we're using very old and archaic language, especially the English language. It is such a vast mixture. It's actually a created language that was designed for trade, if you will, in the very early stages of the nation that we're living in now. It was the so called New World, but we all know that it was actually the very old world. But that's another topic for another time. But just looking at the idea of the etymology of words. And so I don't know, I was doing some reading and I was thinking, I was having a conversation about an upcoming interview with Jeremy Shorter, who's a great author about the hidden truth about the identity of the so-called African Americans or Negroes. And so we were talking about the importance of humility in dealing with one another and really just dealing with ourselves also with humility. And of course, Jeremy comes from a more biblical background, and I do from a psychological background, but I'm really coming to terms with the fact that it's really all the same. I truly believe that the ancient scriptures of the world, including the Judeo-Christian Bible, the Old and the New Testament, the Apocrypha, all of those books, as well as the Indian texts, the Chinese texts, the ancient narratives from Africa, from everywhere. They have such deep wisdom within them, and they all seem to point to the very same truths. So I just have to understand and really embrace my intuitive sense that they all come from the same origin, which is quite ancient. And so, just to get back to the whole etymology of humility, that it's so important to go back to the roots of where words come from and what they really mean. And when you do that, you're able to push aside all of the modern connotations, the things that are added to things through popular media or popular memes or whatever is going on. When you go back to the beginning of anything, you find its true essence, what its true meaning is. And so when I think about humility, right now, in this Western culture that I've been raised in, I think of humility as someone bowing their head and submitting to someone else and really not standing up for themselves. That's the image and the visual that I get from our popular culture of being humble. I think of being humbled or being pushed down. And that might come from, my heritage, my background of living in America as a so-called African American, a person of Black background, that we all know the history. That there's been a physical slavery, there was a mental indoctrination of slavery and inferiority, servitude, all of that. And so that might be where my whole concept, the visual that comes into my mind around the word and the idea of humility. But I did look it up, and I just cross-referenced so many dictionaries and catharsis about humility. So humility is being able to control feelings. It's pretty much the thought that you are able to take charge of your fearful emotions that, can show up looking like the negative aspects of pride, right? The negative aspects of being conceited, or narcissistic. We can put all those in there. But pretty much to round it out, being humble in this context that I'm looking at, as being a human being that wants to live in a cooperative world with other human beings, that we're able to really control fearful emotions that can be negative and counterproductive to living in a world that really works for everyone, where everyone's respected and honored, and we all take care of each other. And so taking care of those feelings that can come up, whether we're feeling prideful because really at the other end of that spectrum, that pride is a clever disguise for our feeling of inferiority. And because we may feel threatened somehow, that our personage is threatened in some way, we may counteract that with a defense mechanism of being prideful, right? To push the inferiority feelings down. And that's what we do. We normally will do that if we don't know what else to do. When we go to that fearful place, we generally want to puff ourselves up to protect ourselves, to look more foreboding to others who may want to attack us. And it's very interesting. It's a very primal instinct to utilize those defense mechanisms. And they're there for a reason. They're about survival. But it's so important for us as sentient beings to understand this truth about us, to understand this natural animalistic nature that's there. It is present. It comes with having a physical body, that can be hurt, that can be harmed. But we have to remember that we're more than that, and the remembrance that we are sentient beings that are from the divine, that there's a part of us that can never be hurt, harmed, or endangered, a part of us that will never be destroyed. And so we have to always keep that in mind. And when we're holding that in mind of our true identity, our true divine nature, that we are the children of God, of our divine creative source, that spark is always within us, that we really have nothing to fear. And so then we no longer need to utilize these defense mechanisms that can create issues within our relationships. So back to humility. When we are able to control a negative emotion that causes us to act out in ways that are going to be counterproductive, well, that is when we get to gain more mastery over ourselves and, really take part in living well, living happily, because we are not being overtaken by these emotions that are all about fear. And when you really break it on down, every negative emotion has fear in back of it. If you really, really begin to think about it, think about hatred. When you hate someone, what are you doing? You're really fearing that in some way they can hurt you, that they can take something away from you. And so you hate them as a way of protecting yourselves from them. Okay? Another one is when we become fearful. We can be jealous. And when we're jealous, we're afraid that someone can take something or someone away from us, something that is important to us, something that is valuable to us. We fear that that person or that thing can take it away from us. That's where jealous is. So all those negative emotions come from fear, some fear. So I just invite you right here and right now, as we begin to meditate on this whole concept of humility and gaining mastery over the fearful emotions that can and will and do come up as long as we're in a physical body. Just face it, they will be there. But when we can gain mastery of them, to recognize, to notice them when they come up, and not let them take control of our choices, so that we actually live in our world and through our lives and through our experiences in ways. Oh, here's a phone call. I'm going to have to put that on pause. Okay. And right there, I don't know if you could see it on my face. Fear came up. It's like, oh my gosh, my video is just about to be ruined because this phone call came in. Why did they call at this time? Why didn't I put on Do Not Disturb? And what that did, it created an interference pattern in my flow. Not only that, I may have to edit this out, but you know what? I may not edit it out because I think it's perfect. It's apropos for what I'm speaking of. But that I forgot to turn off Do Not Disturb. And that person decided to call right here in the midst of this. Now, I could be upset about it. I could just hide it because I'm ashamed that I should have done this and blah, blah, blah. I could go into that fear mode of what I look like, because I did not do that. It wasn't very professional to not put on Do Not Disturb. But I think I'll leave it in. But again, that feeling, that fear, that concern of what I'm going to look like because of what I forgot to do created an interference pattern in my ability to respond correctly. I went into my settings on my phone, and it took me longer than it usually does to find Do Not Disturb because my mind was so frazzled with the worries of what am I looking like? That fear jumped in and it got in the way. So it's perfect. Here it is. It's demonstrated right before our eyes in this very moment. So again, begin to see and think of moments in your life when that fear comes up for you. Just go ahead and close those eyes for just a moment as we get really familiar with the idea of managing fear. In recognizing it for what it is, whether it shows up as pride, whether it shows up as anger, guilt, or shame, jealousy, whatever negative emotion that feels bad to us, whatever it shows up in every aspect of life, it doesn't matter. Begin to notice instances, perhaps in your past, maybe instances that are going on right now in relationship and decision making, or how you're feeling affected by what's going on in the world right now. Just begin to pick one of those fearful moments, those emotions that come up for you. And take a deep breath as you prepare to honestly, really assess and look at the fear that shows up. And just allow that body to relax, those shoulders to release. As you allow the deep breaths to just Allow oxygen to fill every cell of the body. Chest rising and falling, signaling to the body that it's okay to relax right now, that it's all right to let go, and that you're taking time for yourself right now to develop your abilities to gain self-mastery over negative emotions. Begin to notice that time that you've thought of where fear has taken hold, or might take hold, or has historically taken hold. And just begin to notice what that felt like in that moment, when it was signaling to you that you were afraid of what might happen. You were afraid how you were going to appear. You were afraid of what might not happen for you. Maybe of what might not be enough for you. And just notice that instance where fear would take hold. And replay that instant in your mind. Perhaps the first time, just run it through as it happened, from beginning, middle to end. And then when you've done that, replay it again, but this time from a place of self-mastery, where you're able to catch that fearful moment and you're able to transmute it, where you recognize what it is and that you remember the truth about who you are, that there is nothing to fear. And notice how you handle the situation from that higher perspective. Notice how it's different now. Notice how it's easier to choose a better response. No longer a knee-jerk reaction, but employing your real ability to respond, your responsibility to be the change that you've been looking for in the world, to really live that cooperative master that you truly want to be. And just allow yourself to rehearse that higher and better way of responding from a true sense of humility, where you are in absolute control of those fear emotions, that you're not pushing them away, but you're recognizing what they are. And yet, you are choosing to respond from a higher perspective. A higher that there is no lack. A higher perspective that there is no lack. That there is no separation from your true source. Simply because you remember who you really are. And that you have no need to have false arrogance or jealousy or resentment or any other damaging emotion. that can tear down your relationships and that will eventually tear you down as well. You can utilize and demonstrate humility in its most powerful form just by rehearsing and mastering that ability right here within your own mind. In this private meditative state of really getting to know and becoming familiar with your ability to be humble, to be masterful. That's right. And just allow yourself to move through that moment where you would have normally reacted in a less than masterful way. And just watch yourself moving so elegantly through the situation with absolute control, remembering who you truly are from that higher perspective of absolute connectivity, resourcefulness, and real power and strength. And just continue to replay that positive outcome that will result from your mastery until it feels natural to you. Perhaps in that original scenario or in a different one now. Because you now know that those fearful emotions are nothing more than defense mechanisms. But there's nothing to defend because you know the absolute truth about you. You have no need for counterfeit self-identifications. You know the truth. That's right. And one more time, just allow yourself to move through those responses in mastery, all the way through the positive outcomes. And just notice how good it feels. Simply because you know who you truly are. Connecting with your source that cannot be harmed, hurt, nor endangered. How good it is to know the truth. Oftentimes, when we are behaving out of fear and others are reacting in fear with those negative emotions that are hurtful, it's only because we need more information. So until next time, I thank you so much for joining me today here at Beyond Hypnosis. This was another deep download that just came down, and I needed to share with you because I know that someone out there today needed to hear this about the truth of humility and what it really is, and the truth of who you are. a divine emanation right here and right now. Peace and blessings, and take good care.